Seems like the PS5 is back in the news again. Michael Pacther had some predictions to say about it. You know what that means. What's up, guys? Randall Floor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. How's everybody's Friday going? Hope everybody's having a good start to the weekend. My last video, if you missed it, was about Xbox game gifting and Titanfall 2 and Battlefield 1 coming to EA Access. But this video is going to be about the PlayStation 5 because Michael Pacther, the man, the myth, the legend, has made some prediction about it. And I love talking about the man because I just do. I met him at E3 one time and he's a nice dude. But let's talk about this. So I'm on Gaming Boat. You see the headline. PS5 will likely be backwards compatible with PS4 Pro. Will possibly launch in 2019. Now, it's an interesting article. And here's what Michael Pacther, who is a analyst at WebRush Securities, and like I mentioned before, he does like the stock market things, this video game stuff he does as a hobby. It's not really supposed to be serious in like any way, and he does a video series called The Pacther Factor on YouTube. Check it out. I like Michael Pacther quite a bit. But what he says basically, he thinks the PS5 will be backwards compatible with the PS4 Pro. It'll release in 2019. And this is what he says. He says, I really like Sean, and I don't think he's attempting to mislead anybody. This is referring to Sean Layden confirming that they're going to be developing a PlayStation 5, which everybody knew, right? So I think the PlayStation 4 Pro is better from a technical standpoint than the PS4, so I think that's a half step towards the PlayStation 5. I think the PlayStation 5 will be another half step. So Michael Pacther is saying right here that the PlayStation 5 is going to be a half step. You know, not like a full step, not like a huge leap, but basically another half step. I mean, honestly, how could it not be? Because it'd be only coming out 3 years after the Pro. I mean, 3 years will be enough time to make it be better, but he says here, and you know, this isn't me, keep in mind this isn't my opinion, this is what Michael Pacther is saying. So hold your angry comments for the comments section, and don't say it was me, because I'm not saying this stuff. He continues to say, I think the PS5 will be another half step. So he's being honest when he said he is not doing a half step, but the PlayStation 5. How much faster can it be? It will surely support 4K. Will it support 240 frames per second? Great. Will it play games that were made for the PlayStation 4 Pro? That's the question. I think it will. So I think they will build a console that will be backwards compatible with the PS4 Pro. So I think it will be perceived by the consumers to be a half step, and I think Sean is telling the truth when he says it will be a full-fledged console. Interesting thought there. Why mention the 240 frames per second? I don't know what's in there. Obviously, it's going to support 4K, as that the TVs are starting to come down in price. They're replacing the 1080p sets at most stores. So in a couple years, in 2019, as he talks about here about 4K adoption, he says that my expectation is that it's not going to come out in 2018. That is a 2019 or a 2020, but probably 2019. Sony is probably timing it better because they are going to bring out a 4K capable device when the 4K TV market reaches 50% in the US and 35% in the rest of the world. I think Sony has probably got the next console cycle nailed down already. I think they already know what they got to do, he further stated. Now, I fully agree with Pacther on that. Sony has probably been talking about R&Ding the next system. I mean, we know from the Xbox side that the Scorpio was kind of like started planning in 2014 or late 2013. So like these plans for these consoles start way in advance from when they come out. And if the system is coming out when he expects 2019 or 2020, work is probably started on already those systems. They're probably eyeing specs, like what type of GPU to use, what type of CPU to use. And he is right. In 2019 or 2020, the 4K TV market will be way bigger than it is now, and that will probably be a perfect time to release a full 4K console that can run all games at native 4K, not just checkerboarding, but native. And I know you can kind of tell Microsoft, even with the Scorpio, kind of thought this was going to happen too, which is why they made the bet on Scorpio, Xbox One X, and releasing it this year. Now, we all know Pacther. And we all know usually when he says something, you can bet your bottom dollar the opposite happens. So he says it's coming out in 2019. He says it's back compat. And he says it's a half step. So what does that really mean? That it's going to be a full step. It's not coming out in 2019. And it's not going to be backwards compatible. I just said that for a laugh. I mean, who knows? I honestly think it will be back compat because I think Sony would get too much hate and too much criticism if they decided to not support PlayStation 4 back compat natively on the PlayStation 5. I think we're in this era now where with the rise of digital that you have to support that, and you can't support it with PlayStation Now. People won't expect that. People won't support that, especially if you bought Horizon Zero Dawn on the PlayStation 4 Pro for $60, but the PlayStation 5 comes out a couple years later, and now they expect you to pay to access your game that you already bought on PlayStation Now instead of just being able to play it. But I mean, then again, like, we know Sony, man, like, they don't particularly care for backwards compatibility, but with them using x86 architecture, I'm sure they'll use it again for the PlayStation 5. So I expect the backwards compatibility feature to move forward with the PS5. I think, honestly, if PS5 comes out and has no back compat whatsoever with PS4 Pro, that could be a huge PR blunder. But I think the people at PlayStation are smart enough to realize, especially with how good the 360 back compat's doing for Xbox, that this is something that people want. And like I said, digital is taking over more and more and more. And honestly, I think Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo owe it to their fans to actually do backwards compatibility going forward. Now, we know Microsoft is going for a generation-less approach, right? They said there's no more generations. Xbox Scorpio is just a high-end version of the Xbox, but all the games made for it will all have to work on Xbox One S and Xbox One. And you'd assume by what Microsoft is saying that, okay, when Xbox Scorpio Slim comes out in a couple years, that all those games will have to be made playable on Xbox One. That is Microsoft's stance. They said no more generations. Everything's just going to work. I have my doubts with that, like if that's actually going to happen, like if 5 years down the road, if suddenly they're not going to just shift gears and be like, well, we can't really make a game for Xbox One anymore. It's been 6 years. It can't run it. I have my doubts on that, but okay, that's their approach. Now, Sony hasn't really said anything about that. PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro are part of the same family. They get in the collection of sales and things like that. They share the same user base. Now, if you shift to PS5, you basically are kind of starting over to a certain degree because everybody has to move forward. So it's going to be interesting to see how Sony approaches those things, right? I mean, it has to be like, what are they going to do? It's kind of an interesting thing to think about, and I'm sure they're probably thinking about it right now in Sony. I mean, they have a PlayStation 4 that, say it comes out in 2019, that system will be approaching 100 million units. Do they really want to start over at zero with the PlayStation 5? Or will they just do the same thing Xbox as do and just be like, hey, no generations, like, yeah, it's PS5. I'm just kind of curious because, like, this is what Apple and, like, Android do for their phones. Like, essentially, everything's kind of the same. Like, those games will work on different iterations of it. And another thing that is kind of, like, I wanted to talk about was the date itself. 2019. Now, I've been thinking it's been 2019 for a while. 2013 for PS4, 2016 for the PS4 Pro, 2019 for the PS5. It kind of makes sense. 3 years for each one. But then you kind of get into it as like, are we going to have to expect a new console from each of these manufacturers every 3 years? Because if PS5 is coming in 2019, right, then you would expect a new Xbox that isn't just an Xbox One X Slim, but the next Xbox that would compete power-wise with the PlayStation 5 would have to either come out the same year, so 2019, or the year after in 2020. So it's like, are we going to get a console every 3 years from Sony at this point, and then every 3 years from Microsoft at this point? Or is it going to change at some point down the road where they're going to try to maybe move to streaming? I'm kind of curious to see what the console space looks like in 2023, 6 years from now. Like 6 years from now, I'm kind of curious to see, will there be a PlayStation 5 and then a PlayStation 5 Pro? Will there be an Xbox One X2, you know, and another Xbox One X after that? I mean, does the power thing, the chase for power, subside at some point? These are all kind of interesting thoughts that, you know, kind of when I think about this, when I look at the article that I was thinking about, like, I don't know if I want to be in a situation where there's a new console that comes out every 3 years, you know, even if like one console is like you don't need the one, but it just plays it better. But then how much better could it possibly be? Like in 2019, when the PlayStation 5, if it comes out then, like, okay, so it's got 10, say it's got 12 teraflops and whatever new CPU, but then like how much more could they have and how much better could the games possibly look? You know, at some point you end up with diminishing returns on that end. And to be fair, you know, I don't think it's going to come out in 2018. So when Michael Pacther says he thinks 2019, I would agree with him. But also, I think 2020 could be in play here, because that would be 7 years for the gen. 2020 would also be the 25th anniversary of PlayStation in general. That'd be a good year to launch a new system. But that would give also Microsoft enough time to actually make the next Xbox, because that would be 3 years from them. So it's going to be curious to see how like next gen truly plays out, because as powerful as the Xbox One X is, I'm not really sure it's next gen. Yes, the games will look a lot better and run a lot better than on the original Xbox One, but it's not like the next gen. I think the next set of consoles, the ones 3 years away, will be, because developers and publishers are still kind of like targeting 4K. Now, whether 4K is native or whether it's checkerboarded or whether it's dynamic, it's 4K 30. But we want to get to the point where we can do 4K 60. And that may be 3 to 4 years away. That would be when true next gen starts. But who knows what console gaming will look like then? Who knows what publishers will be around? These are just kind of some thoughts I've had on this whole thing, and that's why I wanted to talk about this specific article and what Michael Pacther said on its own. And it's interesting when he talks about the 4K TV market, because I think that's important as well. A lot of people kind of downplay 4K for the Xbox One X because people say it's too expensive, or there's not that many systems out now for it. People questioned whether adding the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray player to the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X was worth it, whereas Sony said they didn't think it was. But will those people in a couple years' time, when everybody has 4K TVs, because that's what they're going to be manufacturing and phasing out 1080p's, they're going to need 4K content. And Xbox is kind of primed, and Xbox can say it's been there the whole time, but then, of course, Sony could come in as, like, the potential market leader and just kind of knock them off the perch and be like, it doesn't matter if you were here first, we're just bigger, and people might flock to that. So, a whole lot of stuff in here to talk about and to analyze, but it's always interesting talking about the future and speculating on it. But to reiterate, Michael Pacther thinks that the PS4 will be back compat, or the PS5 will be back compat with the PS4 Pro. He thinks it'll launch in 2019, and I tend to agree with him. I actually think the same. Even though we joke around about with him, like whatever he says, the opposite happens. I think it'll launch in 2019. I think it'll be backwards compatible with the PS4 Pro, because I think the outrage from PlayStation fans and the media will just be too great to ignore, especially when you consider how important backwards compatibility seems now with the rise of digital. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, share it out with all your friends and followers. I would greatly appreciate that. Sub to the channel if you're new, if you haven't already, please hit the bell so you're notified when I upload all my daily content, as you probably don't want to miss it because it's totally awesome, right? Yes, you know, great stuff is always coming to the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see everybody in the next video. Later.